Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Tuesday, October 28th, 2025, and today we are going to be talking about the state of Virginia that's having an election in just about a week here for governor, attorney general, lieutenant governor, and the House of Delegates races across the state as Abigail Spanberger, the Democratic nominee for governor here, and practically the next governor. She has roughly a 98% chance at winning the governorship, according to State Navigate. We'll be talking with them a little bit later this week about the final things we can expect in the state of Virginia. But Abigail Spanberger made news last night after the press came to her on her bus and asked, how do you feel about the Virginia Democratic Party pushing forth a redistricting initiative right before the election? And what do you think about it in general? And it seemed as if something that Abigail Spanberger had taken a lot of time to really avoid talking about. I think this is something that wasn't really up for consideration for the 2025 cycle and the 2026 cycle, as much as it was seemingly like it was going to be done for 2028. But with a loophole, the Democrats found a way through the state legislature to put forth their initiative and actually pass it across the state. They're voting on it today and tomorrow, and we will see if it ends up coming to reality. But the big piece of news here is that Democrats have gotten Abigail Spanberger on board. It was something that I did not know if it was going to come. Abigail Spanberger has a reputation as one of the more bipartisan members of Congress when she had served. She had been elected from a district that had had a Republican in office for a very long period of time. And so, Spanberger came into this as someone who many voters, even today, view her as a centrist, not someone who self-identifies as progressive or as on the left-wing side of the Democratic Party. I mean, she is very much pretty standard in terms of your average Democrat. And I think that is why a lot of Democrats might have been initially apprehensive, because I do think that what we've come to see is that in the past few months, as this push across the country in California and other states on the Democratic side have come to fruition or not, a lot of it has been led by what parts of the party are willing to support it. And on the Democratic side, you'll see that oftentimes members of the further left, especially those who are, self-identify as progressive, might also be in opposition to the California Proposition 50 or the Virginia Initiative. And so it also was simultaneously, you found members of the center who also opposed it on the basis that they felt that no matter which side of the aisle was doing it, gerrymandering was wrong. It was a very weird and convoluted past few months, and seeing, a very shocking number of Democrats either support it or oppose it. And so we really didn't know where Abigail Spanberger was going to stand on this case here, but she was going to be pretty much the last hurdle there, that if she was holding it up at the state's capital, that it wasn't going to pass. Evidently, it is going to pass based off the amount of votes the Democrats believe they have for this initiative in the state of Virginia, and with the support of someone who's expecting to win the governorship potentially by, double digits across the state that Kamala Harris won by 5.5 points, I think is quite significant, and I think is a good sign for the Democratic Party, and clears yet again another hurdle that might have been a member of their own party this time when it comes down to the Virginia redraw. And so Virginia made history roughly a week ago when they came out and said that they wanted to have a new map for 2026. It wasn't something that, we were expecting, because Virginia has very convoluted rules as to how you can actually do this. Essentially, if you don't know, the Virginia House of Delegates and State Senate must pass the initiative first, hold an election, a regularly scheduled election. They can't call an election. They have to hold an election where voters will then decide to either re-elect their delegate members, senators, etc., and then they would have to do another vote in the next session. And so a special session was left open from the spring, so voters, the Democrats in the House of Delegates took advantage of that, decided to now put forth this initiative because they have the vote, supposedly, to pass it. They're going to pass it, their election's in a week, and then in January, after they're sworn in, vote on it again. And then you might be thinking, okay, well, isn't changing, what's going to happen next? You're right in the year of the election. How is it going to happen? Well, another hurdle there is that voters then have to approve the initiative across the state. So now you're thinking, okay, well, are voters going to vote in November of 2026? Is the map going to be for 2028? No. They're going to hold the election in April of 2026, amend the filing deadline to push it beyond April, which is when it was going to trend around the spring of 2026. They're going to push it to the fall. So yes, primaries are going to be strung out a little bit longer, and the deadline is going to be a bit further. However, it will allow for a new map to pass in Virginia if voters would like for it to do so. Now, Virginia is in a bit of an interesting position because this is a state that, unlike California, only voted for Kamala Harris. I think this is the 2020 results, but if we look at 2024, Kamala Harris only won Virginia by about 6 points. And that's rounding upwards, right? It's a 5.6% margin. Joe Biden, however, won the state by roughly 10. But that's by no means the margins that, Biden saw in California, that Harris saw in California. Biden won California by 29. Harris won it by 20. So it was no shock today when the news broke this morning that Republicans were giving up their opposition to Proposition 50 in California. After all, they've never won this state on the presidential level since 1988, and it has been tremendously difficult to find any amounts of energy or enthusiasm in opposition when Democrats outnumber Republicans in California by roughly 2-1. But when it comes down to Virginia, you're talking a lot closer to a 1-to-1 ratio here. You're talking a lot closer to there being, a considerable amount of Republican support, given that Donald Trump won about 46% of the vote in the last election. And California, unlike Virginia, voted on their proposition that implemented the Independent Redistricting Commission back in 2010. Virginia passed it in 2020 and did so by a massive, massive margin. 66% of the vote passed question 1. Should the Constitution of Virginia be amended to establish a commission that is responsible for drawing the congressional and state legislative districts? So, what the Virginia numbers here were essentially saying and what the results were that they would have an independent commission and that members of both sides and both political parties would work together to pass a map. And so, they did. And after the 2020 census, the map ended up like this. Because of equal representation on both sides of the aisle, the numbers and breakdown here does benefit the Democratic Party narrowly, but does, at least with this map, but actually at a baseline, it really does not. But we'll get to that in another video. If the numbers here for Kamala Harris were that she won the state by a point, Democrats would only have about 4 seats across the state, and Republicans would have a total number of 7. So it would be a lopsided map for sure. Republicans certainly have the underlying advantage, but at face value in 2024, this is actually largely in line with what the Democrats got in terms of their respective vote share. But after they're expecting to win the governorship by 12 points, win the House of Delegates races with 59 seats, they aren't asking for fair representation if Texas is giving Republicans undue representation. 5 more seats for the GOP out of Texas, 1 more seat for the GOP in Missouri, when Democrats only have 25% of representation, which will be reduced down to 13% after this new map is implemented. 13% in a state the Democrats are getting 40 to 45% of the vote in, depending on the election. I mean, it is ludicrous what Republicans are doing across the country, and Democrats are finding a way to fight back. And Virginia stands to be that state. If this is correct, if the numbers are tabulated correctly on the Democratic side and they push it forth, getting Abigail Spanberger's support was always going to be a hurdle. It was always going to be something that I felt she was not going to comment on until after the election, and then she wouldn't be beholden to any type of belief set after getting into office, which I think in a way might have benefited the Democratic Party if she decided that she was going to go, all out on this Virginia proposition to the voters. But there was also a possibility that, she didn't feel that the voters were voting for her for a new map and that she didn't feel an obligation to change the boundaries. She was one of the main proponents of Virginia Question 1 just 5 years ago. But obviously the circumstances of our nation have fundamentally changed. The environment that Democrats are maneuvering is one that isn't just negative because Donald Trump is president of the United States. It's one where Republicans are actively seeking the limitation of Democratic representation in Congress. It is one where Republicans are actively seeking redraws in safe red states to crack the already very narrow and slim amount of seats that Democrats have. Because Missouri being redrawn as a state that already is exceptionally unfair only goes to show how much further and extreme the Republicans are willing to go. Texas is an example there, North Carolina, a state that Kamala Harris in the last cycle got 48% of the vote in after the new map, with North Carolina's first now being safe for Republicans. The number of seats for Democrats has been reduced to 3 and 11 on the Republican side. They are willing to do anything they can to steal the seats necessary to maintain their House majority. And so Democrats now have an opportunity in Virginia, and it looks like one of their biggest hurdles wasn't even going to be getting anyone else on the right on board. No one on the Republican side was ever going to sign on to this. But it was getting Abigail Spanberger on board as governor in this state. And now they have it. And as the Democratic leader in the Virginia State Senate has said, she is, quote, taking notes on a map here proposed that would give Democrats 10 seats in Virginia in comparison to what currently exists as 6 seats for the Democrats. The 4-seat gain that Democrats could end up getting would counteract not only Missouri, but also North Carolina, and the 2 seats Republicans are expecting to gain in Ohio. Virginia could single-handedly, alongside Prop 50, so I guess in tandem with Prop 50, could end up counteracting the gains Republicans make across all of the states they are seeking to redraw for the 26th cycle. And as much as it seems largely inconsequential as a state that, voted for Kamala Harris by 6 and a state with 13 electoral votes could seriously help save the Democratic Party from losing unnecessary seats in the 2026 midterms. Because the math exists for it, and the appetite seemingly does as well. The only wild card here will be, how do voters choose when they have to vote on this again? Because voters on the Republican side, the Republican Party gave up on Prop 50, right? They said, we don't want to do Prop 50 because we know we're going to lose it. And I think very fairly so. The numbers were never trending in the right direction. The fundraising numbers were abysmal for the GOP in contrast with that of what it was for the Democrats. And so I'm not shocked they pulled out of it. But California and Virginia are not the same. California voted for Harris by 20. Virginia voted for Harris by 6. So very, very different circumstances, and ones that I think, when we look at it, we can make the argument that, Prop 50 is also under the environment that, California, not just California as a blue state, but also as a state that has the amount of seats possible at changing the map there where it feels inconsequential, right? California has 52 districts nationally, so 5 more for the Democratic Party doesn't seem all that many. But in the state of Virginia, which has a total of 11, and you're asking to give the Democrats 10, you would be finding that California proportionately would be giving Republicans more seats than Virginia would, and that's the one happening in a much bluer state. And so we will have to wait and see exactly what type of map the Democrats propose to the residents of Virginia to get them on board to this, if they get them on board to this, what the vote looks like in the legislature as we navigate it over the coming days. But as it stands right now, I think one of the biggest hurdles that Democrats were expecting to take a while to get on board was Abigail Spanberger when it came down to the redistricting initiative that we've seen this Democratic nominee exceptionally silent on in the past year. But as we've gotten just a week to the election, it seems like she's on board, and that if she ends up winning by the margin she's expected to and serves out as being a popular governor, she could help carry this across the finish line for Democrats not only in Virginia, but potentially for the midterms on the national level in 2026. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video for you to watch, then a playlist for my 2026 House election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.